Well, hello. My name is Jose Luis Garletti, and we are going to be together in this part of your curriculum, that is, estructuras comparadas del inglés y el español. This is going to be Spanglish, es decir, una mezcla de español e inglés, because the subject is precisely the contrast between English structures and Spanish structures. What for? I'm not pretty sure whether you know what contrastive analysis is, but it's a subject that it's just a tool. Remember that this is not something you're going to teach, unless you're teachers of contrastive analysis. But it's just a tool. A tool, what for? For translators to understand texts better, to produce and translate better, avoiding the negative transfer that the Spanish language gives to the English one, and it's also a tool to help them with the corrections. We all have suffered from this question of esto está mal because it doesn't sound English. But how do we know when something sounds English or not? So, when we translators know that a certain mistake is due to transfer, then we can recognize and explain better why this certain mistake or error has been produced. This on one hand. What kind of subject is it? I call it a minimalist subject. But be careful, It's not in the Chomsky's way of minimalism. It's a minimalist subject because it has un mínimo de bibliografía, un mínimo de material, un mínimo de ejercitación práctica. That's why I call it minimalism. And why is it a minimalist subject? Because you only need two things. And this is very important. You need two things. First, the capacity to think. The only thing that is the most important one in contrastive analysis is to be able to think. Pensar. And you know, perhaps this is the most difficult one. Not because we are not used to thinking, but because we are not used to thinking and relating at the same time. Pensar y relacionar both languages. That's on the one hand. And then you need something else. You need a good grammar or a good knowledge of the grammar of English and a good knowledge of the grammar of Spanish. Because if not, what are you going to compare? If you don't have all these elements clear enough, it will be then very difficult for you to perform a good analytical task and discover differences, ambiguities between both languages. In my own experience, in my previous years as teacher, it happened to me that students had grasped the idea of contrastive analysis. But then, how can you talk about the mood in English and Spanish of, for example, in a relative clause, if you cannot recognize a relative clause? So, the first piece of advice is to start revising your grammars. English and Spanish grounds, which are the forms for the indicative and the subjunctive moods in both languages. And this is very important. Another thing I would like to tell you is how we are going to work. In the introductory section of the subject, which is on the platform, you will read a document dealing with the overview of the subject. That is, the methodology, the syllabuses, the bibliography we're going to follow. Each week we'll start with an explanatory video for you to understand each topic better and to know how we will be working on the contrastive analysis of a certain concept. You will also have forums to participate in, some exercises to do. We will also have some online encounters, some online workshops to reinforce some concepts, to clarify ideas, to do some further practice, etc. What sort of practice will you have each week? El trabajo de ustedes no parte de algo desconocido. El trabajo de ustedes va a partir de una gramática inglesa muy bien sabida y de una gramática española bastante poco sabida. Aunque les parezca mentira, uno piensa más en el lenguaje que aprende que en el lenguaje con el que se nace. Bearing all this in mind, now let me share with you how to do a research work on contrastive analysis. And now I'm going to talk in English because we are going to plunge into English precisely. I would like to show you how to do a research work on contrastive analysis through the book I have recently written and that it is under proofreading, under revision procedures at the moment, and that it is about to be published. When doing a research work, first of all, you should decide what topic you would like to talk about. I would like to talk today about the topic I researched and included in the first volume of the book I am talking about. It's not only because I'm proud of it, which is quite true, but also because I would like to share my own experience with you. In this first volume of the book, I am talking about the subjunctive mood in subordinate clauses. And in the second volume of the book, which I hope to be writing later, I am going to deal with miscellaneous, different topics. Gender in nouns, grammatical gender in nouns, adjectives, especially order of adjectives in both languages, genitive case, the different meanings triggered by the genitive nouns, patterns, verbal tense, mood, aspect, voice, non-finite forms of the verb, todo lo que implica la traducción de la ing al español, sus funciones, sus diferentes usos, sus problemas de traducción, los self-pronouns y sus correlatos con los diferentes significados del pronombre se en español. En tal sentido, siéntanse tranquilos porque no van a tener que comprar ningún libro, no van a tener que salir corriendo a las librerías para ver cuándo se publican, etcétera, sino que los diferentes contenidos que acabo de mencionar se incluyen en el programa de la materia y son los que voy a estar desarrollando a lo largo del cursado. Así que en ese sentido, siéntanse de algún modo privilegiados. And now let's go back to the research work on subjunctive itself, the topic I include in the first volume of the book. And whenever you would like to start research work on contrastive analysis, you have to start reading because you have to get the corpus first, that is, a pool of different sentences grouped together according to a particular aspect of analysis. And where will you get these sentences from? From real books. For example, I have thrillers. I am a fan of thrillers. I love reading, I enjoy reading thrillers, like this one, for example, Wendy's Bottom Box by Stephen King, or even this one, The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler, or this one, Endless Night by Agatha Christie. And then suddenly you read something and you say, this is perfect for subjunctive, and you mark it. Or this is great for relative clauses. Or this is a good example of an adverbial clause of manner. For example, even a very short line like this in The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. The gourd player rubbed his fingertips together as if they were sore and got a cigarette into his mouth almost with the same movement. What are we supposed to do with this? We put it as real examples in the book, and they appear with information in a footnote. This is the example I mentioned, appearing in The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. Here is the translation. You have to translate the sentence or sentences selected from English into Spanish as closely as possible to the structure, because if not, it will be impossible for you to compare. You do the analysis in this case concerning adverbial clauses, and I also mentioned the footnote, where we shall include the source from which the example has been taken. In this case, as you will see, we have Chandler Raymond, the year of publishing, the name of the novel, the publishing house, etc., etc. Well, after analyzing indicative and subjunctive mood in adverbial clauses from a contrastive point of view, suppose you'd like to go on analyzing relative clauses. So the investigation process starts again. You start reading real books to pull out all the sentences, in this case, relative clauses, you would like to analyze from a contrastive point of view, and then you start grouping things together. For example, I'm going to talk about relative clauses, indicative and subjunctive. So, first of all, I group together all the relative clauses that have indicative. And then I group together all the relative clauses that have subjunctive. Then I see what they do have in common. Like, for example, this indicative or subjunctive mood is triggered by the verb in the main clause. It has to do with the antecedent. It has to do with the kind of sentence, and draw your conclusion. Once you draw your conclusions, what you're supposed to do is to write it down. Well, if there are instructions for students, for translators, okay, you'll say subjunctive and relative clauses appear when the antecedent is non-specific, while indicative appears in relative clauses when the antecedent is specific, that is, known to the speaker. In both languages, no, only in Spanish, because in English the mood in relative clauses is always indicative. Well, we shall be developing all this throughout the subject, so don't get despair. This is just to show you how a research work on contrastive analysis is done and what kind of analysis you will have to do when considering each particular topic. And as I have already said, once you do your contrastive analysis, you have to draw your conclusions. That is, you have to justify your findings. And how do you do that? From authentic books. For example, this one, Longman English Grammar by L.G. Alexander, or even this one, A Student's Grammar of the English Language by Sidney Greenbaum or Randolph Quirk, or from any other grammar book you may have in your libraries, from internet, from consultations to natives, from teachers, from dictionaries. I always suggest to consult grammar books because they always tell you whether you are on the right track or not. But from time to time, remember that the things you are discovering are not in these books, and then you will have to provide your own explanation. So, in this respect, do not forget to write the footnotes concerning the sources consulted. Do not forget to type it. Do not forget to include very simple explanations in your conclusion. As you see, it is not only a question of what you say, but also how you say it. Always remember to be very, very clear in your explanations, in your conclusions. And one more thing, because you are, I suppose, thinking of the final evaluation. The final exam will consist of a translation and a complete contrastive analysis of a text in the same way we shall be working throughout the subject. But then you will have some instructions for that at the very end of the semester. Now we have just arrived at the very end of the introductory class. I hope this subject has proved to be very interesting to you in the same way as it is to me, and can get as much profits from it as possible. See you next class. Goodbye.